Imagine life as a great river flowing from the mountain peaks to the ocean. At first, the water cascades violently over rocks, turbulent and unpredictable, like the chaos of birth and childhood. Then it widens into a powerful current, moving with purpose and force through the landscape of youth and adulthood. Gradually, it slows and broadens, meandering peacefully through the plains of middle age and elderhood. Finally, it merges seamlessly into the vast ocean of death, no longer a separate stream, but part of something infinite. We tend to cling desperately to certain stretches of this river, trying to stop the flow, wishing we could remain forever in the rushing excitement of youth or the stability of adulthood. But Tibetan Buddhism teaches something revolutionary. The river's beauty isn't in any single section, but in the entire journey. And the wisdom isn't in resisting the flow, but in navigating it consciously, transforming each transition from a crisis into an opportunity for awakening. If you're standing at any transition point in your life, if you're facing the uncertainty of change or the inevitability of aging and death, subscribe now and activate notifications, because what you're about to discover will transform how you experience every passage from birth to death and beyond. Life's transitions are the moments that define us. Birth itself, though we don't remember it consciously, is perhaps the most dramatic transition of all, moving from the warm, dark, liquid environment of the womb into the bright, cold, breathing world. Childhood to adolescence brings the awakening of sexuality, identity questions, and the first real awareness of being separate from parents. Adolescence to adulthood demands responsibility, career choices, relationship commitments, the construction of an independent life. Young adulthood to middle age confronts us with the reality that time is passing, that some dreams won't be fulfilled, that the body is no longer invincible. Middle age to elderhood strips away social roles, professional identity, physical capacity, forcing the question of who we are beneath all that we've accomplished. And finally, life to death demands we let go of everything, including the body and mind we've identified with completely. Western culture treats these transitions awkwardly. We celebrate birth and marriage, tolerate adolescence, ignore middle age, and hide elderhood and death as embarrassments. We have no roadmap for navigating these passages consciously, no wisdom tradition that honors them as sacred opportunities. This leaves most people terrified of aging, in denial about death, and experiencing each major life transition as a crisis to be endured, rather than a portal to be entered mindfully. Tibetan Buddhism offers something radically different, a complete psychology of transition that maps every stage from birth to death and beyond. The tradition doesn't just acknowledge these passages. It provides specific practices for each stage, teachings that transform transitions from threats into teachings. The wisdom isn't about avoiding or transcending the human life cycle, but about moving through it with awareness, using each change as fuel for spiritual development. The Buddha himself identified the 4 sites that catalyzed his spiritual quest. An old person, showing that aging is inevitable; a sick person, showing that health is temporary; a corpse, showing that death comes to everyone; and a wandering ascetic, showing that there's a path beyond suffering. These 4 sites correspond to the fundamental transitions all humans face. We're born, we mature, we sicken, and we die. The question isn't whether these transitions will happen. The question is whether we'll meet them consciously or unconsciously, with wisdom or with fear. If you've experienced a major life transition that felt disorienting or painful, hit that like button. You're not alone in that experience, and these teachings offer profound guidance for navigating such passages with grace and awareness. Let's begin at the beginning, with birth itself and the journey of childhood. In the Tibetan understanding, birth isn't the start of consciousness, but a transition of consciousness from a previous life into a new body. We discussed this in depth when exploring existence before birth, but it's worth noting here that birth is understood as a kind of death, the death of your previous form and the violent entrance into a new one. The birth process involves the dissolution of the intermediate state body and the traumatic compression into physical form. This explains why birth is so often accompanied by what appears to be infant distress. The newborn enters a world of harsh light, loud sounds, temperature extremes, and the desperate need to breathe air for the first time. From the consciousness's perspective, this is overwhelming, even terrifying. The Tibetan teachings suggest that the trauma of birth is one reason we don't remember previous lives, or even our early months in this life. The shock disrupts continuous memory, overlaying new impressions so intensely that previous experiences become inaccessible. Yet birth is also an extraordinary opportunity. To be born human is considered precious and rare in Tibetan Buddhism, the result of significant positive karma. Humans have the optimal balance of suffering and leisure for spiritual practice. Too comfortable, like gods in the God realm, and you're not motivated to change. Too miserable, like beings in hell realms, and you're too overwhelmed to practice. Human life offers just enough suffering to motivate transformation, and just enough ease to allow practice. Childhood in the Tibetan context is understood as a time of tremendous openness and also tremendous conditioning. The young child's mind is remarkably fluid, not yet solidified into rigid patterns. This is why children learn languages effortlessly, why they're so creative and imaginative, why they can be so present in the moment. But it's also why childhood experiences create such deep karmic imprints. The conditioning received from parents, culture, and environment during these formative years shapes personality, creates tendencies, establishes patterns that will influence the entire life. Traditional Tibetan culture honored this by introducing children to dharma early. Young boys entering monasteries would begin memorizing texts, learning rituals, absorbing teachings before their minds hardened into habitual patterns. The recognized tulkus, reincarnated lamas identified in childhood, would be trained intensively from age 4 or 5, capitalizing on the mind's fluidity to restore access to knowledge and realization from previous lives. For those not entering monastic life, childhood was still understood as a time to plant positive karmic seeds. Teaching children kindness, generosity, respect for life, and basic dharma principles creates propensities that will serve them throughout this life and beyond. Even if children don't understand the philosophical depth of teachings, the exposure creates connections, plants seeds that can ripen later when conditions are right. The transition from childhood to adolescence is marked by the awakening of adult consciousness, particularly the strong arising of desire and the solidification of ego identity. The teenager begins asking fundamental questions. Who am I? What's my purpose? Where do I fit in the world? These questions, if approached with dharma wisdom, can catalyze genuine spiritual inquiry, but without guidance they often lead to confusion, rebellion, and the establishment of unhealthy patterns. Tibetan teachings would address the adolescent transition by emphasizing impermanence and the unsatisfactory nature of seeking happiness in external conditions. The teenager's intense desire for acceptance, for romantic love, for status and identity is natural but also creates tremendous suffering when not understood properly. Teaching adolescents that these desires are normal expressions of human conditioning, but that fulfillment can't be found in their objects helps establish wisdom early. The tradition also recognizes adolescence as a time of tremendous energy that can be directed toward spiritual practice or dissipated in distraction and sense pleasure. Monasteries often had particularly demanding practices for young monks, precisely because they had the physical and mental energy to sustain intensive retreat, study, and meditation that older practitioners might find exhausting. Comment below about a life transition you're currently experiencing or have recently navigated. Sharing your experience helps you process it and helps others feel less alone in their own passages. The transition into adulthood brings new responsibilities and the need to make consequential choices about career, relationships, and lifestyle. This is the stage where most people become completely absorbed in worldly concerns, building careers, accumulating possessions, establishing families, pursuing success and security. From the Tibetan Buddhist perspective, this isn't wrong or to be condemned, but it is dangerous if done without awareness. The danger is that you can spend your entire adult life postponing spiritual practice, thinking you'll turn to deeper questions once you've achieved stability, once the children are raised, once you've retired, once circumstances are more favorable. But circumstances never become perfectly favorable, and meanwhile, life is passing. The precious human birth that offered such potential for awakening is being consumed by activities that, while necessary, don't address the fundamental questions of meaning and liberation. This is why the tradition emphasizes practicing dharma while engaged in worldly life, rather than waiting for some future retirement into spiritual focus. The householder practitioner is encouraged to view work as an opportunity to practice generosity, ethical discipline, and patience. Relationships become opportunities to develop love, compassion, and the understanding that clinging creates suffering. Raising children becomes a profound teaching in impermanence, selfless service, and letting go. The key teaching for adults is integration, not separation. You don't need to abandon responsibilities to practice dharma. You practice dharma through and within your responsibilities. When you're washing dishes, you practice mindfulness. When you're dealing with a difficult colleague, you practice patience. When you're earning money, you maintain ethical standards and share with those in need. When you're with loved ones, you practice being fully present rather than mentally absent. Every moment becomes practice when approached with intention. Tibetan Buddhism also offers specific practices appropriate for busy householders. Short daily meditation sessions, even 10 or 15 minutes, maintain connection to your deeper nature. Reciting mantras while commuting or doing routine tasks accumulates merit and focuses the mind. Studying Dharma texts in small increments builds understanding over time. Attending teachings and retreats when possible provides inspiration and instruction. The path doesn't require monastic renunciation, unless that's your calling. It requires sincerity, consistency, and the willingness to work with whatever life circumstances you have. The middle-age transition, roughly from 40s through 60s in contemporary lifespans, brings confrontation with mortality that can no longer be easily denied. The body begins showing clear signs of aging. Energy decreases. Recovery from illness or injury takes longer. You start attending funerals of peers. Parents age and die. The invincibility of youth is revealed as delusion. This can trigger crisis, depression, desperate attempts to reclaim youth through new relationships, new careers, or cosmetic interventions, or it can trigger awakening. From the Tibetan perspective, this transition is extraordinarily valuable spiritually. The undeniable evidence of impermanence that middle age provides is exactly what young people need to hear but often can't integrate because it seems distant and abstract. When you're 20, death seems infinitely far away. When you're 50, it's clearly approaching, and this recognition can catalyze genuine renunciation, not in the sense of abandoning life, but in the sense of letting go of illusions about permanence and finding what's actually worth dedicating your remaining time to. The tradition teaches that middle age is ideal for intensive practice because you combine life experience with still adequate physical capacity and mental clarity. You've seen enough of worldly success and failure to know that neither brings lasting satisfaction. You're motivated by time's pressure but not yet incapacitated by age's infirmities. Many of Tibet's greatest practitioners achieve their deepest realizations in middle and later life, having accumulated experience and motivation that younger practitioners often lack. Share this video with someone in middle age who's struggling with this transition. The Tibetan perspective transforms what our culture treats as decline into what it actually is, ripening toward wisdom. The transition into elderhood, typically considered from 60s onward, though this varies individually, brings intensification of everything middle age introduced. Physical decline becomes pronounced. Social roles that defined identity fall away through retirement or changing circumstances. Friends and family members die with increasing frequency. The mind itself may begin showing signs of decline, memory weakening, processing speed slowing. In a culture that values youth, productivity, and independence, elderhood is often experienced as diminishment, irrelevance, and burden. Tibetan culture approached elderhood completely differently. Elders were respected as repositories of wisdom and experience. Older practitioners were encouraged to increase their spiritual practice, understanding that this life stage offers unique advantages despite physical limitations. The urgency of approaching death focuses the mind wonderfully. The simplification of life as social roles fall away creates space for contemplation. The direct experience of impermanence in your own body makes the teachings immediate rather than abstract. Many Tibetan practitioners spent their final decades in intensive retreat, having fulfilled worldly responsibilities and now devoting themselves completely to spiritual realization. Even those who remained engaged with community shifted their primary focus to practice, study, and the transmission of wisdom to younger generations. Elderhood was understood as the harvest time, where decades of accumulated merit and understanding could ripen into genuine realization. The teachings specifically appropriate for elders emphasize preparation for death, the ultimate transition, meditation on impermanence and death, which is recommended at all life stages, becomes particularly urgent and effective for older practitioners who can feel death's proximity. Phowa practice, the transference of consciousness at death, is often taught to elder practitioners as preparation for the critical moment of transition. Purification practices take on new significance as the opportunity to create new karma diminishes, and the need to cleanse previous negative karma becomes pressing. But elderhood also offers simply the gift of time and reduced distraction. If you're no longer working full-time, if children are grown and independent, if you've simplified your life and reduced possessions and commitments, you have spaciousness that younger people rarely experience. This space can be filled with practice, with contemplation, with the deepening of wisdom that comes only through sustained attention to the nature of mind and reality. The teachings on aging emphasize acceptance without resignation. You accept the body's inevitable decline without fighting reality or clinging desperately to youth. You accept the approach of death without terror or denial, but you don't resign yourself to meaningless decline. You use every remaining moment to develop qualities that continue beyond this life, to purify negativity, to generate bodhicitta, to realize emptiness. You become increasingly comfortable with letting go because you're understanding experientially that everything you thought was solid and permanent is actually fluid and temporary. The transition through illness, which can occur at any life stage but becomes more frequent with age, is given special attention in Tibetan teachings. Illness is understood not as punishment or bad luck, but as karmic ripening, often the result of previous actions of harming others. But illness is also opportunity. It's a powerful teaching on impermanence, suffering, and the unsatisfactory nature of the body. It develops compassion for others who suffer. It motivates spiritual practice by reminding you that comfort and health are temporary. The tradition offers specific practices for working with illness. Tonglen, the practice of sending and receiving, is particularly appropriate. You breathe in the suffering of all beings experiencing similar illness, taking it upon yourself willingly, and you breathe out healing, comfort, and relief to all who suffer. This transforms your personal pain into a vehicle for developing compassion. The practice doesn't cure the illness necessarily, but it transforms your relationship to it from victim to bodhisattva, from meaningless suffering to meaningful practice. Advanced practitioners sometimes use illness as an opportunity to practice tummo or other completion stage yogas, working directly with the subtle body and the experience of pain. They might use illness to simulate death, watching the mind's response to disintegration and practicing maintaining awareness through dissolution. For realized practitioners, even terminal illness becomes practice, an opportunity to demonstrate that consciousness remains stable and clear, regardless of physical circumstances. Leave a comment about how you've worked with illness or aging in your own life, or watched others navigate these transitions. Your experience contains wisdom that others can learn from. Now we approach the ultimate transition, the one that gives all others their significance, death itself. In Western culture, death is the enemy, the ultimate failure, the terror we try desperately to deny through distraction and medical intervention. We hide dying in hospitals and nursing homes, remove it from daily life, speak of it in euphemisms if we speak of it at all. This denial means we're utterly unprepared when death arrives, for ourselves or our loved ones. Tibetan Buddhism makes death central to the path. The tradition teaches that death is inevitable, its timing uncertain, and at death, only your dharma practice will help you. Nothing else you've accumulated, no wealth or status or relationships, can accompany you beyond death. Only the qualities you've developed, the karma you've created, the realizations you've achieved continue into the bardo and future lives. Understanding this transforms your priorities immediately. What's worth dedicating your precious time to if death could come today, this year, within the decade? The teaching isn't meant to make you morbid or depressed. It's meant to clarify what matters. When you truly integrate that death is certain and its timing uncertain, you stop postponing practice. You stop wasting energy on trivial concerns. You become more present with loved ones, knowing any encounter might be the last. You appreciate simple pleasures more deeply, seeing them as temporary gifts rather than permanent entitlements. You orient your life toward what will matter when death comes: your mental state, your karmic accumulations, your realization. The tradition offers detailed instructions for the dying process itself. Ideally, you die consciously, maintaining awareness through the dissolution stages we discussed when exploring existence before birth. As the earth element dissolves into water, water into fire, fire into wind, and wind into space, you remain present, recognizing each stage. As the white and red elements descend and ascend, meeting at the heart, you prepare for the clear light. When the clear light of death appears, that pristine awareness that is mind's deepest nature, you recognize it and merge with it. In that recognition, complete liberation is possible. Death becomes enlightenment. For most practitioners, this ideal is aspirational rather than immediately achievable, but even approximating it makes tremendous difference. Dying with mindfulness, with bodhicitta, with some recognition of mind's nature, even if only fleeting, creates enormously positive karma for future rebirth and sets you on a trajectory toward eventual enlightenment. Dying in confusion, clinging, and fear creates negative karma and leads to unfortunate rebirth. This is why preparation is emphasized so strongly. You practice dying before you actually die. Meditation on impermanence and death familiarizes you with the reality you'll face. Dream yoga teaches you to maintain awareness through transitions between states of consciousness, preparing you for the transitions of dying. Phowa practice trains you to transfer consciousness skillfully at death. Studying and contemplating the Bardo Thodol familiarizes you with what to expect, so when it arrives you have some reference point. The teaching also addresses how to help others who are dying. You create a peaceful environment free from excessive grief or distraction. You remind the dying person of their dharma practice, their refuge, their bodhicitta. You read instructions from the Bardo Thodol or other texts. You don't cling to them or plead with them to stay, as this makes their transition more difficult. You maintain your own calm awareness, supporting them in maintaining theirs. If they're practitioners, you remind them to watch for the clear light. If they're not, you simply help them remain as peaceful and aware as possible. After death, the tradition teaches that consciousness remains near the body for a period, typically 3 days, but variable. During this time, the body shouldn't be disturbed. Prayers and practices should be done for the deceased's benefit. The Bardo Thodol is read aloud, offering guidance even though the person appears physically dead. The tradition understands that consciousness can still hear and benefit from instructions during this transitional period. The 49 days following death are considered critical in the Bardo journey. Prayers, rituals, and practices are done on behalf of the deceased, creating positive conditions that can influence their Bardo experience and future rebirth. This isn't superstition, but recognition that consciousness in the Bardo is vulnerable, fluid, and influenced by conditions including the prayers and merit dedicated by those still living. For the bereaved, Tibetan teachings offer profound guidance. Grief is natural and honored, but excessive grief that becomes attachment can actually harm the deceased by pulling their consciousness back and disrupting their journey forward. Better to grieve while also practicing on their behalf. Dedicating merit, maintaining your own dharma commitments. This honors their life and death more meaningfully than prolonged incapacitation by sorrow. The teaching also emphasizes that death isn't ending but transition. The person you loved hasn't ceased to exist. They've simply moved to the next phase of their journey. Your connection continues at the level of karma and Buddha nature, even though the physical form is gone. This perspective provides genuine comfort. Not the false comfort of denial, but the deep comfort of understanding reality's actual structure. Share your commitment to preparing consciously for death in the comments. Will you begin a daily meditation on impermanence? Will you learn and practice Phowa? Will you study the Bardo Thodol? Making your intention public strengthens your resolve. Throughout all these transitions, from birth through childhood, adolescence, adulthood, middle age, elderhood, illness, and death, the underlying teaching remains constant: impermanence. Everything is changing, always, without exception. Your body is changing moment to moment. Your mind is changing thought to thought. Your circumstances are changing constantly. Relationships form and dissolve. Health comes and goes. Success and failure alternate. Birth inevitably leads to death, and death inevitably leads to rebirth. Western culture treats impermanence as a problem to be solved. We try to preserve youth, freeze happiness, prevent change, avoid loss. This creates tremendous suffering because we're fighting reality. Tibetan Buddhism treats impermanence as the fundamental nature of conditioned existence and therefore as the gateway to liberation. When you truly understand impermanence, not just intellectually but experientially in your bones, several transformations occur naturally. First, you stop clinging so desperately to temporary conditions. You enjoy pleasant experiences while they last, but without the anxiety of trying to make them permanent. You endure unpleasant experiences knowing they too will pass. This creates tremendous equanimity, the ability to remain balanced through life's ups and downs. Second, you stop postponing what matters. If you want to practice, you practice now. If you want to reconcile with someone, you do it now. If you want to live according to your values, you start now. Impermanence creates urgency but not panic, clarity but not rigidity. Third, you develop renunciation in the positive sense, not the rejection of life, but the letting go of illusions about permanence. You see that no amount of accumulation, achievement, or control can provide lasting security because everything is subject to change. This naturally orients you toward developing qualities that continue beyond this life, toward realizing the unchanging nature of mind that exists within all the change. The practices for working with impermanence are simple but profound. You observe your breath, noticing each one is unique and unrepeatable. You watch thoughts arising and passing in meditation, seeing the mind's constant flux. You contemplate how your body has changed from infancy through childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and continues changing now. You reflect on how your relationships, circumstances, beliefs, and preferences have all changed throughout your life. You visit cemeteries and contemplate that everyone there was once alive, vibrant, pursuing their concerns just as you are now, and all are now gone. These contemplations aren't morbid if approached with proper understanding. They're liberating. They wake you up from the sleepwalking most people engage in, the assumption that life will continue indefinitely, that there's always time, that circumstances are more permanent than they are. Impermanence makes life precious because it's fleeting. It makes moments sacred because they won't repeat. It makes practice urgent because death could come at any time. The ultimate teaching on life's transitions is that they're all preparing you for the final transition, and that final transition is preparing you for liberation. Each small death, each letting go, each change from one stage to another is practice for the ultimate letting go at death. If you can move through life's transitions consciously, with awareness and acceptance rather than denial and resistance, you're training for death itself. And death in the Tibetan view isn't ending but the most profound opportunity. It's when the layers of conditioning temporarily dissolve, when the clear light nature of mind appears nakedly, when recognition and liberation are possible in ways that are more difficult during life's distractions. Every life transition is bringing you closer to this ultimate opportunity. Every practice session is preparing you for it. Every moment of mindfulness is training your consciousness to remain aware through dissolution. As we complete this exploration of life's transitions through the lens of Tibetan Buddhism, consider where you are in your own journey. Are you in the energy and confusion of youth, building a life and establishing yourself in the world? Are you in middle age, confronting mortality and questioning what you've built? Are you in elderhood, watching the body decline and preparing for the ultimate transition? Wherever you are, these teachings offer guidance for navigating your current stage consciously and preparing for what comes next. The invitation is to stop resisting change and start working with it. Stop denying death and start preparing for it. Stop treating each transition as crisis and start seeing each as opportunity. Your life is a precious gift, but it's temporary. The body will age, sicken, and die. Relationships will change and end. Everything you've built will eventually crumble. This isn't pessimism. It's realism that paradoxically creates the possibility of genuine joy and meaning. When you're not desperately clinging to conditions you can't preserve anyway. When you're not terrified of changes you can't prevent. When you're not in denial about death you can't avoid. You're free to be fully present with what is. You can appreciate your current life stage fully, whatever it is, knowing it's temporary. You can love deeply without the grasping that poisons love. You can engage wholeheartedly with life while simultaneously preparing for death. This is the wisdom of working skillfully with life's transitions rather than being overwhelmed by them. If this exploration has shifted your perspective on aging, change, or death, if you see life's transitions differently now, subscribe and activate notifications. We're systematically exploring Tibetan Buddhist wisdom that transforms how you experience existence from birth to death and beyond. Share this video with anyone navigating a difficult transition, anyone who needs to understand that change isn't the enemy, but the teacher. Most importantly, practice. Begin meditating on impermanence daily. Study teachings on death and the bardos. Learn and practice phawa. Simplify your life to focus on what will matter when you're dying. Develop qualities that continue beyond death: wisdom, compassion, ethical discipline, realization. Every moment is an opportunity to prepare for the ultimate transition. Will you use it wisely? May all beings navigate life's transitions with awareness and grace. May all beings prepare consciously for death. May all beings recognize the clear light when it appears. May all beings achieve liberation through understanding impermanence and using each change as practice. Thank you for engaging with these profound teachings on the complete journey from birth to death. May your path be illuminated by wisdom, and may you guide countless others through life's passages with compassion and clarity.